Hello, and welcome to this presentation on construction contracts and delivery methods presented by Tech Training LLC. Let's start by discussing a little bit about bidding. Realistically, all bidding procedures come down to one of two processes. It's either going to be a negotiated bid or a competitive bid. Competitive bidding is what we are all familiar with. This is when an owner or the owner's representative asks for bids on a proposed project. Typically, the bid will be reviewed based on the lump sum price submitted by the contractor. In this type of bid, the lowest qualified bidder will be awarded the project. We emphasize qualified as they must also meet other criteria. As an example, they must be able to obtain the appropriate bonds and insurance for the project. However, there are cases where the contract may be awarded based on other criteria. When the contract will be awarded based on other criteria, the price may remain out of view until the other criteria have been rated. This is done so the price does not influence the other criteria of the bid. Other criteria an owner may consider more important than price may include the project team's experience, the proposed delivery method, innovation, risk mitigation, and schedules, just to name a few. The other form of bidding is negotiated bidding. Negotiated work does not consist of simply negotiating the price, but may also include the delivery method, payment terms and conditions, quality of materials, and even who leads the project. There could even be negotiations on who has say in design changes or value-added items. Typically, in competitive bidding, much of this information is already in the documents before contractors submit their proposal. The biggest disadvantage to negotiated bidding is that contractors do not need to work as hard to establish a low price. However, owners consider it a waste of time to do competitive bidding if they already know which contractors they prefer to work with. All bids, whether they be negotiated or competitive, are submitted based upon the contract documents. Understanding and familiarizing yourself with the contract documents is the first step in establishing a reasonable price. The contract documents consist of multiple sections, including, of course, the invitation to bid. Also included will be the instructions for bidding, the bid form, general conditions, supplementary conditions, technical specifications, working drawings, and any addenda to the documents. The invitation to bid is exactly that. It is an invitation to contractors with whom owners or the owner's rep would like to work with. The invitation will include a summary of the project, including project size, project location, owner, etc. The bid procedures that contractors must follow are in the instruction to bidders. The instructions to bidders are going to include the date, time, and location where the bid must be submitted, as well as any pre-bid information. There is a standard form that most contractors use. It is called the bid form. The cost of the project, as well as the time to complete the project, will be listed in the owner's agreement. This agreement formalizes all of the documents and conditions of the project. In most cases, the general conditions are simply boilerplate information that is in the contract. However, the general conditions is not meant to define the rights, authority, and relationships of the parties involved in the project. Supplementary conditions are exactly that. They are supplementary to the general conditions, since the general conditions are usually boilerplate information. The supplementary conditions may include such items as additional insurance, additional bonding, prevailing wage, etc. The quality of work, the materials used, the equipment, etc., are in the technical specifications. The technical specifications are written documents and descriptions of these matters. The drawings go hand in hand with the specifications. Drawings will follow the logical order of construction, beginning with site work and ending with finishes. There are also various abbreviations and legends that one must be familiar with when reading the drawings. As an example, A1 is architectural while C is civil. If there has been a change to the contract documents after they've been issued, an addenda will be issued. The addenda comes in the form of statements, drawings, and technical information, and is considered an update to the original documents. It is worth noting that the information described thus far is typically for projects with the design, bid, build, delivery method. If the project is to be design, build, or construction management, the documents are limited because a complete design is not available before the project begins. This is because the contractor is usually involved with the design. Therefore, the available documents may be as simple as a conceptual drawing and description. Since we just mentioned a delivery method, design, bid, build, let's take this opportunity to discuss project delivery methods. In ancient times, great structures were constructed by master builders who developed the project concept, designed the appearance, put together the technical details of the finished building or monument, and mobilized the resources needed to actually build the structure. This classical approach was used to build the Great Pyramids, the beautiful castles and churches of the Middle Ages, and the civil engineering infrastructure of the Industrial Revolution. Master builders designed and constructed facilities acting as a single point of contact for the client. Over the past 100 years, the processes of designing and building were gradually separated. Design and construction were viewed as separate endeavors. A design professional prepared the project plans, and a separate firm was contracted to perform the actual construction of the facility. The separation of activities also led to a sequencing of activities in which design was completed before construction commenced. This became the traditional sequence and is now referred to as Design Bid Build, DBB. This contracting procedure is what we are all familiar with. It is how we renovate our kitchens and baths. The design, bid, build, delivery method has withstood the test of time. Two relatively new contracting methods have been introduced that emphasize simplifying the project delivery process. Price, as previously mentioned, is not as central to these formats as in the competitive or negotiated types of contracts. The emphasis is on optimizing parameters other than cost. This may include quality, time of completion, meeting marketing needs, safety, or some other criteria important to the owner or stakeholders. Design, build, and construction management delivery methods differ from the traditional design, bid, build form in terms of how they address the two critical issues of project delivery, design and construction. They also facilitate the use of phased construction or fast tracking based on design and construction occurring simultaneously. This approach is in contrast to the sequential nature of the design, bid, build approach. So let's talk about the design, build, delivery method. Actually, design, build has been around for a while. It has been common practice in industrial construction to use the design, build approach for complex projects that have tight time requirements. In such cases, it is advantageous for the client to have a single firm providing both design and construction. This system has the advantage that differences or disputes between the design team and the construction team are internal matters, not affecting the owner. This eliminates the development of an adversarial relationship between two or more firms involved in the project. Normally, the management of the design-build contractor is motivated to reconcile disputes or differences between design and construction in an expeditious and efficient manner. If such problems are not addressed, they can lead to loss of profit, or worse, potential legal issues related to poor performance. Coordination between design and construction is also enhanced by having both functions within the same company. This system improves the communication between designers and the field construction team and assists in designing a facility that is functional and efficient to construct. In other words, the single firm is designing the facility and building the facility in the most cost-effective manner. Design-build contracts also have the advantage that design and construction can be done concurrently, meaning that the work can be started in the field before a complete design is available. This allows for phased construction or a fast-track approach, as previously mentioned, and a compression of the schedule because the design does not have to be totally complete prior to the commencement of the actual construction. During the 1970s, this type of contracting method was used mainly on large and complex projects, petrochemical plants, industrial complexes, and power plants such as the Seabrook Nuclear Power Plant. This system improved the flow of information between the design team and the construction team. Usually, only firms with large design and construction capabilities were able to provide design-build services. Projects built with a single design-build contractor were often referred to as turnkey projects because the owner dealt with only one contractor, and that contractor was charged with the completion of the facility so that the project was ready to be placed in operation with the turn of a key. That is, the owner was not involved in the project until they received a key, which allows them to occupy the facility. Design-build-delivery is not uncommon in a joint venture. In many cases, it is the design and the build that brings the parties of the joint venture together. Since most building contractors do not have an in-house design capability, contractors typically form a team or joint venture who work together to meet the needs of the client. The owner-client contracts with the joint venture as a single group, which provides the total project package, design, construction, procurement, etc. Each member of the joint venture is at risk and is motivated to work with other members to minimize delays and disputes. In effect, a group of designers and constructors form a joint venture to build a project based on the conceptual documentation provided by the owner. They agree to work together to achieve the project and, therefore, implicitly agree to avoid developing an adversarial relationship between one another. The members of the joint venture are motivated to be innovative and avoid cost overruns, as this will result in a loss to all the members of the joint venture. Again, the adversarial relationship typical of designer and constructor is largely eliminated, since bickering and lack of cooperation among members of the team can lead to significant losses. Incentives to avoid disputes and to develop innovative solutions to field problems is inherent in this type of contracting method. This joint venture-based design-build contracting method has gained such wide acceptance in the private building construction community that it is now being used by the federal government on a number of projects. A number of larger federal projects have used the design-build-delivery method in a joint venture, most notably Boston's Big Dig Third Harbor Tunnel project. In most cases, the owner-entrepreneur has worked with one or two lead contractors who form a design-build team to meet the customized requirements of the client. Competition among competing joint ventures in the private building construction sector has not been a major issue. This is not the case in the public sector. With the advent of the use of this method in the public sector, competition has been a major factor. Selection of the winning joint venture is based on the competitive review of proposals from each joint venture. In this format, the joint venture not selected incurs substantial losses based on the cost of organizing and developing a competitive proposal. In the construction management (CM) type of delivery method, one firm is retained to coordinate all activities from concept design through acceptance of the facility. The firm represents the owner in all construction management activities. In this type of contract, construction management is defined as that group of management activities related to construction programs carried out during the pre-design, design, and construction phases, which contributes to the control of time and cost in the construction of a new facility. Here, the CM is defined as the owner representative, contractor, architect, and engineer. This firm has the function of a traffic cop or enforcer, controlling the flow of information among all parties active on the project. The construction management firm establishes the procedures from awarded contracts to architects, engineers, principal vendors, and the trades and subcontractors. In this control or management function, the construction management firm uses the project schedule as a roadmap to keep things moving forward in a timely and cost-effective manner. The major functions carried out by the construction management firm will vary depending on where the project is as it relates to pre-design, design, or construction. Construction management contracting is particularly attractive for organizations that periodically build complex structures, hospitals, municipalities, or DOTs, but do not desire to maintain a full-time construction staff to supervise projects on a recurring basis. Now, to finish off this segment on project delivery, let's take a few moments and compare the various methods. From the project delivery perspective, competitively bid contracts are required to be design-bid-build contracts. Negotiated contracts can be viewed as design-bid-build contracts, although it is not unusual for design and construction to proceed in parallel in a given situation. Here we see a diagram of the design-bid-build approach. As you can see, information is exchanged between the designer and the contractor, but it must formally flow through the owner. The relationship between the designer and the contractor becomes an informal relationship at best. The advantages of the design-bid-build delivery method is that it is known to owners, designers, and contractors. This is probably its greatest strength. The procedures and contractual rules of this process have been conducted for many years and completely worked out. They are well understood by all parties. Construction professionals prefer this method because in many cases it reduces their level of risk. Another advantage is, under the right conditions, this means that the project may proceed smoothly from beginning to end. The design-bid-build approach also contains considerable contractual protection for the owner. The allocation of risk for construction performance rests almost entirely in the contractor's hands. The owner is protected from many of the risks of cost overruns, such as labor inefficiencies, non-performing subs, inflation, and other unforeseen conditions. Lastly, the owner does not have to be heavily involved in the process. They must be involved in the design process to make key decisions about whether or not to accept design, but once construction actually begins, the owner is represented by professional empowerment. Day-to-day interests in the project are not necessary. Several elements of the design-bid-build approach can work against the owner. First, the construction professional does not enter the process until the design is complete, meaning that the design is not usually reviewed for constructability before it's finished. Design features that could have been built more economically or effectively often result in higher costs. Some design firms overcome this problem by hiring pre-construction consultants or having construction professionals on their staffs. Although this does benefit the project, it is not as effective as having the designs reviewed by the person who will actually be doing the construction. Another disadvantage to this process is that it is difficult to reduce the construction time once the project begins. The process is sequential and linear. There is no opportunity to overlap tasks and thus reduce the overall schedule. This may raise interest expenses on construction loans and other costs and can expose the project to greater risks. The time element problem is one of the primary reasons for the recent decline in the use of design-bid-build. Finally, all parties work independently when using this method. The designer designs, the constructor constructs. Prices, schedules, materials, and methods are based on the construction documents alone. This approach provides little opportunity for interaction between team members and can lead to major breakdowns in relationships. This diagram shows us the design-build delivery method. As you can see, information flows easily and quickly between the designer and the constructor. Design documents and subcontractors will send information back to the design-build team, which can be directly related back to the owner. Some of the advantages of the design-build delivery method is the single contract. For the owner, it is much easier to be dealing with one firm. However, one of the major reasons for choosing the design-build arrangement is the benefit of solid communication between the design team and the construction team. Many of the large design-build firms specialize in particular areas and have developed smooth flow between the design and construction team. This collaboration allows the project to be easily fast-tracked. Good communication also allows construction input early in the design phase. This input includes constructability, value engineering, and subcontractor pricing. Cost estimating, scheduling, long lead items, and ordering all become part of the overall project plan. In general, this arrangement allows easier incorporation of changes due to scope or unforeseen conditions, since the coordination occurs within the same contractual entity. Finally, the owner is less involved and remains outside the direct day-to-day communications between the designer and the constructor. This keeps owner staffing to a minimum and puts the full responsibility for good communication, problem-solving, and project delivery on the design-build team. Probably the biggest disadvantage to the design-build delivery method is the lack of a fixed, firm price when construction begins. Because the firm is hired before the design had started, any real pricing is simply not possible. Instead, an owner is usually entering this arrangement with a conceptual budget. This delivery method puts the design-build team in the position of making the scope fit the price, which carries the risk of sacrificing quality to protect profit. If the project is fast-tracked, the owner may not have a good idea about the final price until the project is underway. The owner's ability to remain marginally involved can be both an advantage and a disadvantage. When a design-build company has an organization that is efficient at performing the work, the project can move very fast. But if the owner does not stay involved, and issues arise such as unforeseen conditions, they may have to make decisions without fully understanding the impact on the project. Another big drawback is the lack of checks and balances. In the traditional DBB approach, a set of documents is designed, and then the contractor is held to the quality of those specifications. In the design-build approach, the complete design is not done until after the construction has begun. We briefly discussed modified design-build. Here, the owner is attempting to use a system called bridging. Bridging is a hybrid project delivery method that combines early traditional design with a superimposed design-build model to create a two-step process. This hybrid model assures a fixed construction cost and schedule earlier than possible in the traditional model, while at the same time retaining owner-designer ability to freely fix the schematic design and establish performance standards. Here, the owner hires an architect for the preliminary design. Then the owner solicits the bids from the design builders, while the architect essentially serves as the owner's representative. And finally, construction management. The biggest advantage to the construction management approach is it saves the owner resources. The owner is hiring the construction manager to run the project from start to finish. The CM is the owner's representative and the general contractor. Also, the technical expertise is provided by the CM, as well as the architects and engineers hired by the CM. The entire team is brought together early to share their experience and expertise. Also, competitive pricing is a big advantage. As an example, subcontractors are under contract to the CM. So if the project is broken into 20 bid packages with 5 bidders per package, the owner is receiving the benefit of 100 competitive bids. Some of the disadvantages to this system is typically a firm price is not established early in the process. This is because many CMs will design as construction continues, similar to the design-build process. Therefore, the project cost is not guaranteed. However, there are ways around this, and this leads us back to contracts. The 3 basic contract forms are as follows. Lump sum contract, often referred to as a stipulated sum contract or fixed price contract. The second type of contract is a unit price contract, and the third type of contract is a cost plus fee contract. Let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each. For a lump sum contract, a price can be agreed upon either through competitive bidding or negotiation. However, with a lump sum contract, the contractor is agreeing to construct the project in accordance with the contract documents for one fixed set price. In this type of agreement, the advantage for the contractor is they must complete the project in accordance with the contract documents. Therefore, they have freedom to make decisions as long as the job is completed in accordance with the documents. The disadvantage for the contractor is that they are absorbing all of the risks. As for the owner, this gives them assurances of the cost of the project before construction even begins. Furthermore, for the owner and the contractor, payments become simplified. The timing and amount of each payment is easily negotiated, as the final cost of the project has been established. Where payments and cost become an issue with this type of contract is if there is a change order. Since the cost of the project was predetermined, the cost of changes can become very expensive. As an example, under the lump sum agreement, the contractor has a right to payment for additional work, additional time, and additional overhead. Needless to say, if the original work from the original documents has already been completed, and then the owner decides they don't like it, the costs can soar, and again, the contractor is entitled to additional fees. If the owner wants to keep costs down, there are two things they can do. First and foremost, allow the contractor to be involved with the design from the beginning. The contractor's expertise is realistic constructability, and realistic design is priceless. Also, if the owner is truly considering a change, inform the contractor as soon as possible. The earlier the contractor knows, the lower the cost of the change. As for contractors, they can help the owner make decisions by explaining that if a change is to take place, it is not only going to be an increase in cost, but an increase in time. And again, if the contractor is involved in the design process, the contractor should emphasize this point to the owner during the design process when changes are less expensive. Another big advantage to having the contractor involved in the design process is the contractor can identify poorly prepared documents, bad drawings, or poor specifications. All of these items increase the potential for change orders during the project. Furthermore, though it is difficult, the contractor must be steadfast that they cannot begin any work on a change order without expressed written authority from the owner. Yes, this sounds like common sense, but work begins without written agreement many times, whether it be a small contractor or in some cases an international organization. The biggest disadvantage of lump sum contracts for the contractor is the risk. The contractor is guaranteeing a price, even though their costs are based on estimates. Granted, they are the ones that did the estimates, but they are still estimates. Case in point, if the cost of steel skyrockets in the middle of a project, the contractor must absorb those losses. On the other hand, if the cost of steel plummets, the contractor reaps the savings. For this reason, before the contractor enters into a lump sum agreement, they should be sure that they completely understand the full scope of work at the time of bidding. Now, unit price contracts. Unit price contracts are exactly that. Contractors will bid on the estimated quantities of work. The bid may be submitted as a single unit, as an example, $150 per cubic yard, or on the completion of the work. In this type of contract, it is the owner who will typically provide the quantity takeoff. These types of bids are very common for infrastructure projects, as the majority of these projects will consist of roadwork and thus earthwork. The owner provides the quantity takeoffs because it is almost impossible to develop exact quantities of materials. This way, everybody is bidding on the same estimated quantities, and adjustments can be made during the project if the actual quantities vary from the estimates. By using the owner's numbers, contractors are essentially estimating their own efficiency to complete the work rather than the estimated quantities. A contractor can use their own estimated quantities if they feel this gives them a competitive advantage, But this is risky, as if they estimate their own quantities and arrive at the same number as the owner, they've spent money on an unnecessary estimate. However, if the contractor believes that the owner's quantities are low, they can spread their overhead cost over a greater number of units. This means that the contractor will be submitting a lower unit price while making the same or more profit. It is worth noting that the owner-provided quantities is what is used for any government project. As for accounting in these types of contracts, the payments are on the price that the contractor bids per unit of work, as well as the actual work completed. Therefore, an owner will typically have their own people verify the actual units completed. This is because the contractor and the owner don't know for sure the exact quantity in a unit price contract until the project is complete. Now, the biggest advantages of this type of contract is the contractor can spend their time pricing labor, materials, and reviewing their own efficiency to come up with the most economical approach to the project. Since many contractors may do their own quantity takeoff, this decreases the chance for quantity errors, as there is a larger pool of estimates. For the contractor, the biggest advantage is the risk. If quantities increase, the owner's cost will increase. If quantities decrease, depending upon the agreement, the owner's cost may also decrease. But in some cases it may not, as there is usually a plus-minus factor in unit price contracts. The risk the contractor is assuming is that they can complete the work at the stated unit cost. In other words, if their unit costs increase, they have to assume the loss, and if their unit costs decrease, they get the profit. There are other considerations for unit price contracting. If the contractor is using the owner's quantities, and those quantities end up being high, the contractor's overhead is now spread over fewer units. Thus, the overhead per unit is going to increase, and thus decrease the contractor's profit. However, once again, if the quantities are low, the contractor's overhead is spread over more units, decreasing the cost per unit and increasing the contractor's profit. For this reason, most unit price contracts include a plus-minus clause. In other words, if the quantities are off by 5%, the contractor will complete the job at the unit price originally agreed upon. If the quantities are low by 5%, the owner will pay the original cost of the contract. However, if the variation between the estimated quantity and the actual quantity differs by more than this agreed upon percentage, the price per unit is renegotiated. Another common contract is the cost-plus fee. Here, the contractor is agreeing to complete the job for a given price plus a predetermined fee. In this arrangement, the contractor is reimbursed for construction costs and paid the fee on top of those costs. But it is very well defined in the contract as to what is considered reimbursable construction costs and what is considered non-reimbursable construction costs. As an example, an owner may consider the construction supervisor to be part of the construction company's overhead, and therefore their salary not be a reimbursable item. But the contractor may be thinking, they've hired the construction supervisor for this specific project, and therefore is a reimbursable cost. If an owner is interested in completing the project as quick as possible, this may be their contract preference. When innovation, speed, and quality are the key factors, this contracting method is a good choice, as construction can usually begin before all the drawings and specifications are complete. This type of contract offers much flexibility as far as payments are concerned, but excellent record-keeping and purchasing procedures are necessary. This type of accurate record-keeping and purchasing procedures are required because the contractor needs to be reimbursed for their purchases during construction. Therefore, all procedures and reimbursable items must be clearly understood by all parties. Like all contracting methods, there is a risk involved here as well. Here, the contractor is being brought in during budget talks and therefore has an obligation to stay within budget, though in most cases, it is the owner who is ultimately responsible for additional costs. It is also very unlikely that an owner would rehire someone who's gone over budget. Therefore, a contractor's professional reputation is on the line. Of course, this is true for the entire project team when using this type of contracting method. Architects would not be hired if their designs are causing budget issues on the project. In most cases, since the entire team is involved in the design and budget of the project, everyone's professional reputation can be damaged throughout the industry if they fail their portion of the project. As an example, even investors would back off from working with an architect who is known for over-design. Another take on the cost-plus-fee contract is the cost-plus percentage. With this type of contract, the contractor is paid a percentage of the total construction costs. Here, the disadvantage is obvious. The contractor has no incentive to keep costs down. The advantage for the owner is, if the overall costs go down, so does the fee. However, this type of contract has lost favorability in the industry for obvious reasons. It is typically only utilized by extremely knowledgeable owners who maintain tight fiscal control over the project. Next is cost plus fixed fee. Here the contractor is paid a fixed fee for the project, no matter the project costs. The obvious advantage to the fixed fee contract is, it removes the temptation of the contractor in the cost-plus percentage type contract. Of course, the disadvantage to this contract is the contractor has little incentive to keep the cost low, as their fee remains the same. Similar to the cost-plus percentage contract, the owner assumes project overrun costs. This leads us to the fixed fee with a guaranteed maximum price, or GMP. In this contract, the contractor is paid a fixed fee, but the contractor is also assuming the risk of project cost overruns by guaranteeing the owner a maximum price. Owners obviously like this type of contract, as it combines the advantages of the fixed fee with the advantages of the GMP. In this type of contract, the contractor is assuming most of the risk. However, the owner is required to pay any cost overruns until the GMP. Once the GMP is reached, the contractor assumes cost overrun risk. In other words, if the guaranteed maximum price is $1 million and the cost of concrete was $150 a yard at the beginning of the project, but suddenly skyrocketed to $250 per yard, the owner absorbs that cost. Unless the cost of the project has already reached $1 million, then the contractor absorbs the cost. The big disadvantage to this type of contract is that the contractor cannot establish a price until all the drawings and specifications have been completed. It is virtually impossible for a contractor to guarantee a price with incomplete drawings and specifications. In some cases, owners and contractors will establish a GMP with a sliding scale that allows them to share savings and overruns. Now, in other types of contracts, there is a sliding scale fee, where the fee will decrease as the costs increase. This type of contract can provide the contractor with incentives to keep the costs low. This is considered an answer to the cost-plus percentage contract. The big disadvantage here is that change orders have to be discussed in detail, as the contractor's fee should not be reduced if a change order occurs which is out of the control of the contractor. Bonuses and penalties. These types of contracts are becoming more and more common. Here, the contractor is reimbursed the actual costs and a fee is established. But if the contractor completes the project at less than the targeted costs, then the contractor gets a bonus. The bonus is usually a percentage of the savings from the construction costs. Adversely, if the contractor goes over the targeted costs, they suffer a financial penalty which is deducted directly from their fee. This bonus penalty type contract is now frequently applied to completion dates on infrastructure projects. A contractor and highway department agree that if a project is completed earlier than the scheduled completion date, the contractor gets a bonus. but the contractor will also suffer a penalty for each day the project exceeds the scheduled completion date. When it comes to contracts, it is worth noting the devil is in the details. No contractor is going to sign an agreement, nor should a client, without first checking the various contract provisions. Though all contracts vary, most contracts have standard sections. Case in point, scope of work. The contractor, when they sign an agreement with the owner, are obligated to the owner to complete all of the work which is required. This work will be discussed in the scope of work. Another section of all contracts will be the time of completion. For smaller projects, this may be a specific date, but for larger projects, this may be listed as working days or calendar days. If this is the case, holidays and weekends have to be considered. The total contract sum will be listed as its own provision if this is a lump sum contract. This is the total amount accepted and negotiated between the owner and the contractor. In cost-plus fee contracts, the exact fee should be listed, along with reimbursables, and the contractor's accounting responsibilities to be reimbursed. The very nature of construction is time-consuming. Therefore, payments during construction must be established. These are progress payments. Progress payments are payments issued as certain phases of the project are completed. Another provision of all contracts is retainage. Retainage is short for retained percentage. It is an amount that the owner withholds from all payments as protection to ensure the completion of the project and to ensure the contractor meets all of their financial obligations to the subcontractors. When the contract calls for special items, the owner's representative will ask for a statement of values. The statement of values is simply a price list of the specialty items. More complex projects will have a work-in-place and stored materials provision. These are items purchased by the contractor that have a value in place. In other words, completed work which has value. This is calculated as a percentage of the work which has been completed. The provision of the contract that everyone looks forward to is the final payment and acceptance. Usually, the final payment is the sum of all retained payments. The contractor will receive this final payment after all of the inspections, the work has been accepted, and any liens on the project, if any, have been released. The final payment is made at a preset time and location. So here we covered the various sections of the construction documents, including bid forms, drawings, technical specifications, and addenda. We also covered the three core construction delivery methods: design, bid, build, and construction management. And lastly, we covered the basics and construction contract types, including lump sum contracts, unit price contracts, and cost-plus fee contracts. And this concludes Contracts and Delivery Methods. Presented by Tech Training LLC.